Hi everybody, Gregg Hoffman here, co-owner of Urban Pump Personal Training Studio. And today we're going to do a mini lecture on functional exercise. How we define it, first of all, and why we think it's important to do. Okay, so defining functional exercise, but before we do that, let me kind of cover the high strength training program a little bit in a nutshell. And then I'll break it down into the functional exercise. We're just focusing on that piece today. So, the high strength training program in and of itself consists of three different components. Very important components in my opinion. The first one being strength training. And really, if you want to see the best changes in your body, that's got to be the cornerstone of what you do. Talk for another day. Then the other thing that I feel is very important in a good exercise program is a core and stability training. Once again, I'll break that down on another lecture, another day. Today we're going to focus on functional training. We have all three of those pieces in our exercise program, the high strength training program, to bring about a very well-rounded way to exercise and strengthen and condition the body. So, moving on, here's how most fitness experts view functional exercise to begin with. They look at it in two different ways. One is doing movement patterns in the gym that mimics movement patterns that an individual will do in their daily activities. So, as an example, if somebody would work at UPS or a place like that where they're lifting a lot of boxes, doing some torsional rotation, putting the boxes up on the shelf, and they do that all day long, they talk to a personal trainer about designing an exercise program, a functional exercise program. The trainer will probably design a routine, a functional exercise routine that will mimic those motions with heavier and heavier loads over time, thinking that it's going to help prepare that person's body for that kind of movement pattern. So that's one way fitness instructors will look at it. And another way is they look at functional exercises as doing a bunch of explosive training. This relates more to sports, that kind of thing. They really think that to produce a lot of power and to be able to push, like let's say a linebacker off the line with explosive motions, that they need to do explosive training in the gym to better prepare the person for that. So this is generally how most fitness trainers will look at designing a functional exercise program. There are a couple of problems with this view, in my opinion. First, there's the problem of what's known as transfer. There are three forms of transfer when you do any kind of activity, physical activity. You've got positive transfer, neutral transfer, and negative transfer. So what does this mean? Well, let's start with positive transfer. Positive transfer is movement that you would do with one particular sport that's very close to doing a movement pattern for a different sport. And they're close enough in technique that the one will do a positive transfer to another. I think a good example of this would be doing a chest pass with a basketball and maybe another sport doing some kind of chest passing too. That kind of motion and getting that fine motor skill down in one sport transfers positively to another sport. Then there's another one that's called neutral transfer. That means that this particular movement pattern that somebody will do in one sport or maybe in a training program will not have a positive nor a negative effect in the sport that they're doing. Negative transfer, on the other hand, does have a negative piece to it. It would be a movement pattern that's very close to what somebody might do in another sport, but it would be off just enough to really throw off the pattern, the timing, the neuromuscular drive, the fine motor control, so that it would be a negative transfer from one sport to another. You wouldn't think it's possible, but it is. Here's a good example. Let's say that somebody plays baseball, hardball, and they've been playing hardball for years, swinging the bat at a hard pitch coming at them with a smaller ball. Well, they've worked on that fine motor pattern, fine motor skill, eye-hand coordination to a very high degree if they do for years, to where they really have that down as best as they possibly can. Now, if the same person were to, let's say, play softball, and they would go up against a pitcher who lobs the ball, and it's a bigger, rounder, or a bigger ball in general, and the motion's different, it's a little bit slower, but they're used to that same swing. It's really built into their drive. It makes it very difficult for them to hit the ball very well from softball as compared to the baseball. I've experienced this. I played baseball for years, and I thought I'd do well playing softball, and I played for 1 or 2 years, and I never really got my hitting skill down. It really surprised me. So there's 3 different transfers. You've got the positive, neutral, and negative. So one of the problems with functional exercise in sports setting, and I'm talking about training, let's get back to that. Doing explosive motions, for example. Well, that actually is a neutral transfer. They're doing explosive motions with heavy weights in a certain movement pattern in the gym, and they think it's going to make them more explosive out on the field. That's not necessarily the case, because they're not going to be pushing the same loads in the same manner that they are out on the field. So it would be, at best, a neutral transfer, but it can also be a negative transfer in the fact that when you do a lot of explosive training in the gym, you're putting a lot more stress on the joints and connective tissues, and you can create injury just by training, trying to mimic what you do out on the field. So I'm not a big fan of explosive training on that front, and it can have both neutral and negative transfer. Now, another problem with functional exercise, functional training, and I think this has more to deal with somebody that does work, physical, hard, manual labor work, doing work in the UPS, for example. Let's get back to that. If they do the same movement patterns over and over again, it leads to a lot of overuse injuries. We're talking arthritis, tendonitis, osteoarthritis, sprains and strains, stress on the ligaments and tendons of the body. And they get overused, they get inflamed, and they start hurting. As a matter of fact, another problem with doing the same kind of motion in a gym that somebody would do at work is that it would create muscular imbalances too. And this is another point I want to bring up. Some muscles get weaker, other muscles get stronger, and that gets worse over time when you do the same movement patterns. And that leads to a lot of chronic pain, particularly lower back pain. So I'm not a big fan of doing functional exercise, functional training in the conventional sense. But we do agree that functional exercise is important. It really does have its role in an exercise program. However, we do define it very differently than what other fitness trainers do. Here's how we define it. Functional exercise, the way we look at it, is general whole body movements done under load to teach the body to work in a 3D environment. Now, why do I think that's important? When I first started experimenting with adding functional exercise to our training program, I really didn't know if it was important enough to put in. I didn't know if it was result producing, if it had any real value to the exercise program. Now, I knew it had a variety, and there's a lot to be said for that, but actual true producing of results, I didn't know that. But I experimented with it for a few months before I decided, yes, it's important to add this into the training program, and here's why I feel it's important. It's because when you do general strength training, you isolate the body parts to get them stronger. So, for example, if you want to strengthen the legs, the quadriceps, glutes, and hams, for example, you do leg presses. If you want to strengthen the chest, you do bench presses. We all know this. You want to strengthen the upper back, you do pull downs. But what you do is you're isolating those individual body parts and really training them intensely to try to get them stronger. And it works. It's a very incredible, a very efficient way to get stronger. But the problem with that is that you don't teach the legs to work with the core, to work with the chest, and coordinate their force production capability in a 3D environment. It leaves a little bit to be desired. And I found this to be the case, and it is the reason why we added the functional exercise to what we do, because I would get guys in here that were very strong, didn't do any functional exercise, and I would have them do a few of those kind of types of exercises, and they were all over the place. They had no real coordination, they struggled with balance, they struggled with proprioception, which was body awareness in relation to space. So they really struggled with these things even though they were strong and fit. By adding general whole body movements done in a 3D environment under load, they got better at it. So I feel it's very important to do that, to really integrate all the muscles to have them to work in a synergistic fashion after you strengthen them. So in my opinion, that's why functional exercise plays a very important role in what we do. So anyway, benefits of doing it that way: first of all, you avoid overuse injuries. And once again, the reason why is because it's general. It's not specific to what somebody does outside of the gym. Getting back to the person that does UPS and doing that same motion over and over again, you do functional exercise in the gym, that's general. It's not going to further exacerbate those potential overuse injuries that the person may have. And then the other thing is that it avoids high impact injuries. And this is in particular talking about sports again. All the explosive training people do in the gym really increases that injury potential. You slow down the repetitions and you do a more controlled tempo. Even when you do a functional exercise, more controlled tempo, you don't get the high impact potential injury that you would from doing the explosive training that most people do. Other benefits: it teaches the muscles to work in unison in a 3D environment, just like I talked about earlier. Also helps improve balance and coordination, proprioception, body awareness in relation to space. And the final thing is it does add a lot of variety to the program. There's truth to understanding that if you do the same routine over and over again, that you start hitting a plateau. It's not necessarily because the muscles plateau. A lot of times it's because the mind starts checking out. You come in, do the same workout after workout after workout. The mind knows what it's going to do, what it needs to do the next exercise, and so what it's going to do is, in a subconscious manner, it'll try to sandbag, it'll try to get out of it a little bit easier, so you just won't put as much effort into the workout as you otherwise would if you had a lot of variety to the program. If you don't know what you're going to do from day to day, functional exercise does a great job of this. The mind stays a little bit more alert, going to put more into the exercise program, and it adds a little bit more fun to what you do. So here's a couple of demonstrations. I tried to get the video piece to work on this. For some reason it doesn't. It did back in the day. I don't know. Maybe I need some new software programming with it. But anyway, I did it with a photo. This one's called a cable press lunge. We use a free motion machine in this case. Handles right there. And what I'm doing, actually that's not a very good picture. What I'm doing is I'm starting here, and then I'm pressing and lunging. Coming back, switching legs, pressing and lunging. That's what this is supposed to represent. So every time I come back, I switch legs, press and lunge again. Like I'm trying to push a car out of a mud puddle. I do with a faster but controlled tempo, mimicking what actual functional movement would be outside of the gym, and getting the whole body to work as a unit. In this case, quads, glutes, and hams are involved in doing this. The core has to stabilize, and the chest is pushing, and all those muscles are working in a synergistic, coordinated fashion. Once again, teaching the body to work as a unit. Here's another example. This one is a lunge reverse wood chop. You start in the lunge with the cable coming from the side, then what you do is you stand up out of the lunge and bring the bar or the cable up across the body. We call that a lunge reverse wood chop. What I like about it is that since you're working in an unstable environment, the stabilizing muscles around the hips, knees, hips, knees, ankles have to work harder. Core is working very hard, and then once again getting the chest and shoulders involved to a certain degree. But it's once again working in a 3D environment, a general movement pattern that you just don't see very often anywhere else, but it teaches the body to work as a unit in a 3D environment. So that's a couple of examples of functional exercise that we do, how we define it, and the importance of it. So to wrap it all up, functional exercise, in our opinion, can add a lot of value and variety to your workouts. I think it's a very important piece to add to the exercise program, and it just makes things a bit more efficient and fun at the same time. Thank you very much.